Okay.
Hi.
So hi, I'm with Kathleen Talboom. How do you pronounce it? Talbaum or Talboom?
Talboom.
Talboom. And you live in Florida, yes?
I do. I live in Pinellas County on the west coast of Florida.
And what are you doing there in Florida?
Well, I don't go out. I have been in my house. I've gone out 9 times since the third week of March. And occasionally I will go out and I get to drive my husband around while he goes on errands just so I can see that there's still a world out there. So I've been pretty isolated, but um, what I do for a living, I'm a financial advisor, and none of my clients are in Florida. So I've been working remotely with my clients since 1990. So my business life hasn't changed, but all the other things that went with it, like going to the post office or going out to lunch, or those things just don't exist for me anymore. So, but that's okay. I'm better equipped to deal with it than most people, I think. I don't
Not,
mind Zoom meetings. I go to church on Zoom. I'm fine. You know, and the thing, Andrew, another thing, we were talking about resilience. One of the things that I think really is detrimental is that we've got to stop thinking about these tiny inconveniences. They're not even sacrifices of distance and not handshaking and wearing a mask as an infringement on our rights. No one is entitled to deprive another human being of their physical well-being in their life. And that's what this ignorance that has been promoted for political reasons is doing. You know, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, because I know we talked about, FDR and his ability to pull us out of the depression. But a lot of times when I talk to older people, they'll say, well, I don't want to go to a nursing home. I'm never going to an assisted living facility, and I want to die in my own home. And then they have to go, and then they die. And the reason is because they're not looking at the benefits of going there, that they have someone to feed them in a nice dining room, and that they get, all their needs taken care of, and they get to meet new friends. They're not looking at the possibilities they could have. All they're looking at is lack. And it's this virus in the kind of business I'm in. They always talk about risk as a black swan, something you did not see coming. 2008, it was the mortgage crisis. Well, COVID-19 is like a flock of black swans blotting out the sun, because the whole rest of the world has decided, except for a few knuckleheads, let's just call them that, in Brazil and the United States, that they're going to contain this virus, and that they're going to wait for a vaccine. And what that has enabled them to do in cooperative societies, more cooperative than we are, is individualism isn't running rampant. It's the society as a whole. And the example I always use when I call people and try and talk to them about what to do is I use Germany. Aggressive testing, shut down early, made sure that they had hospitals and everything at the ready, and very slowly reopened. And they're even testing people who go on vacation now and come back to Germany. And the difference is remarkable, because what they did, no one lost their jobs. They just pushed the money through into the economy. And so when they opened up, nothing had been disrupted. Whereas here, everything is disrupted.
yeah, well, we reopened with still a high number of people already infected. So it was just like an explosion from a powder keg.
Yep.
So what do you think's going on with America? Like, why is America struggling with this so much?
I think um, because we don't have we've had this attitude of American exceptionalism, and what has made us exceptional is not our military. What has made us exceptional was resilience. Do you realize at the beginning of World War II, we had a smaller army than almost anyone in the world? And Franklin Roosevelt, again, the man who couldn't get out of a chair, took the entire US economy and put it into this war effort. And we were turning out, I was reading about the number of planes in a day. It was amazing. And the ships and the vehicles. And it was like, we did that because we had to. And see, what we're doing now is we're trying to be belligerent and say, well, that's not true. And you cannot escape reality. Reality just gets you.
So what is it about us? So we've got this American exceptionalism sort of blinding us from our own babiness. We're basically complainers now, huh? It's like we've lost that sense of resilience.
A portion of us that's complainers, but the majority of us would like to cooperate. The majority of people, my husband wants to be able to go to the grocery store and be safe going there. He's 73 years old.
Yeah.
I had hoped that we would handle this differently, much like some states like New York have, where I would be able to go out and have some outside dining experience in August and September. And I thought, maybe we'll have a window of where we can actually enjoy, but no, what we had to do is we had to bend the crisis to our will. And willfulness just isn't going to work in this scenario. Willfulness will not succeed. You can't change the facts. And I am very frustrated because a few people, a minority of Americans, are causing this damage to be longer lasting, deeper, more loss of life, more economic strife than was needed. This is unnecessary. And what we need to understand is if 95% of the American people, I heard this morning, if 95% of the American people were wearing their masks, we could decrease the deaths by the end of December by 66,000 people. That's, it's not that none of this is easy. And supporting the people who have lost their jobs, will be evicted and will face foreclosure. I mean, that can't be allowed to stand, because if it does, it'll take us decades, not months or years, to recover. Jerome Powell, do you know who he is?
Jerome Powell?
Yeah, he's the head of the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
Anyway, he said that it would take about $11 trillion, but that the American economy was in good shape before this happened. But if you could keep enough in place, and that's why the stock market's still going, nobody knows this, but Jerome Powell's been buying our corporate and our national debt, our government debt, to keep our economy afloat. But there's going to be a breaking point if we don't follow through with how we treat the people at the bottom. So anyway, he said that, we could take 36 months to recover if we did what he said we need to do. And obviously no one's listening to the man, or the right people aren't. Let's put it that way. So we're facing a longer, harder path with this virus than just about any country in the world, except maybe Brazil. Brazil may have it worse than us because they're poorer and they don't have as much medical relief intact. But, we're making this worse for ourselves, and we need to. And I would have thought that there'd be more pressure from the investment community. I do know that about 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, 100 of the largest CEOs, people like Disney and Microsoft, and all sent a letter to Congress saying, get your act together because time is up. So, and I understand why Powell's doing what he does, and everybody says, well, we don't want to give rich people money, but if you lose your airlines and your railroads and you lose your transportation hub and you use your supply chain because big corporations fail, then they are too big to fail. Because that's why Germany is coming out of this in such a strong position. And so is China, quite frankly. So I want to talk more about the emotional
but
things.
that's a great point. Just to cap off on that portion of our conversation. Like, that's a really good point, that there's a reason for buttressing the top, and it's not fair, but it's essentially structurally the right thing to do. And then the question is, like, ethically, like, how many people are just out of work for months and now, being evicted, and just, it's like, this is just going to keep getting worse. The effect of the economy is going to be far more intense than even the effect on lives.
And one of
but
the
it's a chain reaction
that we look at is that one of the things that people don't seem to be understand when they see a little light at the end of the tunnel, they jump the gun and we start to reopen. And I fully anticipate that if Ron DeSantis sees us below 5% anywhere, he's going to say, blow it open completely. And see, that's where you get into trouble, because you have no check valve. You got to have a check valve, and we don't have one. And so, and I think that our country could be resilient. We are wanting to cooperate. I see examples of people being really kind to each other and trying to help each other on the personal level. I just don't see it on the political level. I just see it as it's been turned into something that it's not. A virus is an inanimate object. It has no, it's just little tiny droplets that can kill you. And so all you got to do is keep the droplets out of your nasal cavities and your eyes and your mouth. Just do that and you're okay. But we don't seem to, it's all like, no, my mouth is just fine. I went to physical therapy. This is a true story. And my physical therapist was telling me that, because he's afraid of COVID and he's got an N95 mask, and I go twice a week and I wear my mask, which makes all the physical therapy harder. But anyway, he said, all my older patients, he says, they would say, I've got to take my mask off to talk to you. And he says, no, that's the point of the mask, is that when you're talking to me, you got to have your mouth covered. So he says, no, leave it on.
That's right. It's amazing that this tiny little RNA strand is essentially reminding us that we're one big organism, that we really can't operate separately. That when we do operate separately in divisive ways, in highly polarized fashion, we're essentially hurting each other.
And I think that's a lot for a lot of people to grasp it all. That's a hard one for them to understand, because they've got an ideal of themselves as the rugged individual. And that's, when we're talking about American exceptionalism, I think American exceptionalism is not the rugged individual. American exceptional was barn raisings. It was neighbors who took firewood to the family where the husband had died and they needed wood for the winter. It's people who pitched in and took care of their mothers or helped women deliver their children. And I think that's what was exceptional about us, is that, and I think the civil rights movement and always the push to do better, to expand the franchise, to make us a stronger, better, more perfect nation. That's American exceptionalism. Not, I get mine first, I work 60 hours a week, everything's what kind of car I drive, what kind of house I live in, those material things. That's not American exceptionalism. Our exceptionalism used to be our devotion to the community and to be taking care of each other. And I look at my mother and my grandmother as examples, and Americans have always had a streak of independence, but it hasn't always been the selfish independence. It's been an independence of spirit. So
I feel like narcissism comes out of a sense of insecurity. So it's it's inherently this lack of knowing yourself that is behind
Mhm.
the sort of the materialism and the addiction and um, the image, the craving
Wh-
of greater
When
self-image.
when your sense of loss is so great that your identity was in your job, your identity was in what you did for a living. It wasn't in your family or your church or your children or goals for the future. It was in where you worked. And then you take that away, that sense of loss is devastating to people. It's almost as devastating, I would think, as people experiencing a death in a family. Because if your identity is taken away, it's like an athlete who gets terribly injured and their identity is taken away because they can no longer perform as they did before. The person is still there, but it's like investing yourself so much into material success that you're not looking at what spiritual success is. And people say spiritual success. Well, yeah, realizing that you have a spiritual side, and that's where all of your really good attributes come from, like kindness and generosity, and and just being a good person and believing in good. Reinforcing that good, and that's why this is so sad for me, is because that's what it's going to take for us to come out of this hole. It's going to take us all taking care of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really taking care of ourselves, I guess, too, right? I mean, just
Well, you are, when you take care of others, you're taking care of yourself, because
yeah.
it comes back to you, and it's not a one-way street. There's a reason that some people are so needy, and we won't mention the person who I think is the neediest, but when you never got love, and I read I read his niece's book.
Me too.
It was one of the saddest books I've ever read.
Yeah.
A little 2-year-old boy who didn't get love. I mean,
And
that's
then you live your life in this narcissistic shell of a life where you're basically, it's all about appearances, it's all about sales, it's all about convince, and you get really good at that, right? Like, wow,
oh yeah,
impressively good at the appearance of things. But then inside, what's happened? You've neglected this little child. This little child's never grown up, and and that's kind of, I think that's why Donald Trump is so much the representative of American culture today. I mean, that he is. Some will say, "Oh, it's just a shadow," It's like, yeah, but it's a pretty significant portion of what American uh, mindset
well,
is
and
today.
and a lot of our corporate. I've been a licensed, true confession. I've been a licensed stockbroker since 1986. So I've seen a lot of Donald Trumps, and they usually wear silk bracers and they're full of themselves. And the problem is that um, they're a lot of times they're not performing that well. So the show must go on. And so a short little lady like me who just wears jeans to work, like, how can you do that? And um, I always knew when I was around a bunch of those guys that I was a lot bigger with assets under management than they were. But it was like they would almost treat me like I wasn't there, like I was invisible, because I wasn't putting on the show. And so you got to put on the show, and then a lot of times that's why when you go back 30 years later, none of them are still doing it, because they were all show and no go, and that's a big difference. And so I think that that's one of the things that we have to realize as you look at all the countries that have succeeded in this endeavor. Um, and this is pointed out in an article I read a long time ago. Well, not a long time ago. It seems like it's only 6 months ago here. Um, about in China, that people were willing to go far away from their children to work in Wuhan and do the things they needed to do to deliver groceries and take that risk to go there, because they had, while they had to break up families to control the virus, they also had a deep reverence for their elderly. And here we don't have, one of the reasons that Black and Latino families are impacted so much more is because they live in households. You live in a household where you have a grandmother and you have her children and their children, and they're living in a small house, and they can't socially distance, and they can't leave the world because they have to work.
Yeah.
And so that's why that happens. But I think that one of the things we have to get back to is valuing everybody, and this nonsense about that some people can be sacrificed for the economy, like came out of the Texas when I think he's a lieutenant governor or something like that, said that older people should be willing to sacrifice their lives for their grandchildren's futures. That's just a crock.
Yeah, I think the whole concept is misguided in the sense that we're just addicted to the current system, or addicted to how things have been, and we're blinded to see how things could be. And I think really if we sort of backtrack to what human society and civilization really is, what we're living in right now is quite an anomaly. This is not your normal human civilization where stock trading is the meter of success and failure of your people. These are very peripheral, tangential concepts that don't really indicate how well you're doing as a society. As a society, we're kind of sick. We're polarized. We are physically sick. I wonder if the high rate, the higher infection and death rate in America isn't partly due to poor health based on lousy diet and other factors that America is more prevalent in than Europe and other countries.
Well, also lack of access to healthcare. You can't have. There's actually a lawsuit by 23 states right now to have the whole ACA, Obamacare, declared unconstitutional. It's going before the Supreme Court. And these 23 all conservative-led states have signed on to this lawsuit to kick all these people off of the ACA immediately with no mechanism to replace it. So in Florida alone, there's 1.7 million people on the Obamacare exchange. And a lot of them are getting supplements, from the government to pay for their coverage. But those people would immediately lose their healthcare coverage. And another thing that people don't think about is a lot of these unemployed people, our healthcare system goes through employer coverage. So if you lose your job, you lose your coverage. So then with your little $600 a week even, that'll keep you afloat. But what people understand is you can't afford to pay for COBRA. And COBRA is where you have to pay all of the premiums your employer was paying to keep your insurance. So we're compounding the crisis we're in by creating crisis on top of crisis. You've got evictions, foreclosures, loss of health insurance. And, sometimes that's why what's going on right now is so important. They better get their act together, because if they don't, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
This is really, you like to liken this maybe to World War II, right? Like we're at war. It's a major challenge.
It's worse than World War II, but
what?
Yeah, it's worse than World War II in that we knew who the enemy was. It was a definable enemy. This virus, that's one of the things that makes it so hard for people, because everybody, and I've even had friends say, well, nobody tells us, we don't know what to do. And why are you believing this? And blah, blah, blah. And the problem you've got is that this is a novel virus, which means by its definition that it's new, that there's no knowing about it. There's no characteristics that you can say for sure this is why people get it, no, we don't know. So then you've got this unknown thing. So then you slowly learn certain things that might help in therapeutics and things like that. But you're still got this undefinable thing to fight against. And people are saying, well, why? I don't feel fine. Why am I losing my job? Why am I going to lose my house? Why can't I go to work? Why can't I just go back to being who I am? And they don't realize that there's 320 million people in the United States, and you let 1% of them die, that's 3,200,000 people. So that's, I think, a lot of it is just not defining the problem, but also not realizing what really makes us strong. And resilience is the key. And I think that, you have to be able to change if you're going to be resilient. You have to be able to put a mask on. You have to be able to wash your hands. You have to be able to clean surfaces, whether people come in and out. I haven't had anyone in my house since the last week of March. My grandson tested negative at his job, and so I let him come to dinner one night. But that's it, because he's back in the world, and so he's sequestered off in his own room. And so he doesn't come in this part of the house. He has his own entrance through the garage, and he's got his mini fridge and his microwave out of my office. And so he's got his own apartment.
So how does this feel? How does this feel for you?
Well, it feels, it's sad. And I like to see him. I do see him when he opens up the door, or I tell him to back up and put his mask on. I'm delivering food to his entertainment console top in his room. But, it's just discipline. Andrew, think about the lack of discipline. I mean, you think about what they went through in the Depression to get over that, and how they hired all these scientists. That's, a lot of people don't know about that. But do you know why we got the school lunch program? Because during World War II, they studied they studied all kinds of things. Soil conservation came out of the Roosevelt administration. How to plant crops and not have erosion and dust bowls anymore. How to public health was really enhanced. All these things. But the reason that we have the school lunch program, and I'm not making this up, is because the upper body strength of our soldiers wasn't very good, because the American people were malnourished. And before Social Security and unemployment compensation and the works projects where they went out and did all this stuff, where they just took gobs of government money and dumped it into hiring people to, do infrastructure and build parks and plant trees. And those things, the school lunch program came because our soldiers weren't strong enough. So, well, what would you do that? And that's when we came up with a pyramid that wasn't so handy dandy either. But nutrition as a science started to come about. And so they threw a lot of stuff at the wall, but they used whatever stuck and it worked. And you got things like restrictions on child labor. You got the 40-hour work week. You got unemployment insurance, and you got Social Security. Because before Social Security, no one wants to admit this, that's conservative. Everybody could save for themselves and do all that stuff. Before Social Security, the majority of elderly in this country lived in deep poverty. If they didn't have a relative to take care of them, they were in deep trouble. And so that's just the reality of what we faced. But it took people who were willing to be cooperative to go and to fix it. And that's what it's going to take to be resilient. You gotta find ways around your problems. And the ways around this one, we can see examples from other countries. I just heard a sheriff here in Florida, in one of the counties, and he's the head sheriff in Volusia, I think. And he caught COVID, and this interviewer asked us, well, what would you like to recommend? He said, I would just like to recommend that we just start listening to the scientists and everybody stops getting beyond what they think. Because, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And, I do see encouragement in the way people treat each other, but I'm also, there's not going to be enough of the national will molded to address this problem,
Right.
not like Roosevelt did.
And I think what we're also dealing with is because the economy essentially is going to have a bigger hiccup than the Depression, in a sense. It may not last as long because we're robust, but it's the drop is so intense right now. We're going to have to think very creatively about how to keep our society on track, keep people from starving, keep people from being homeless
Calling
in
Andrew
millions.
Yang. I'm serious. Calling Andrew Yang, because what we're facing a lot of problems here, and one of them is we were already facing a looming crisis from automation replacing people. One of the things we need to realize is that there is a lot of these jobs that are not going to come back, and that there's a lot of structural change that's going to take place that we can't see all now, but I can see one very clearly, and that is that I think how we approach work is going to be different. More people are going to be doing what you and I do now at work. They already do travel less. Corporations are finding out they don't need all this office space. People are just as productive working from home as they were when they went to meetings and flew all over the country. And so you're going to see a lot of economic disruption in what goes on. And then if we don't help small businesses, and that's a huge part of our employment engine, is our small businesses. And the small businesses, I don't think, have been given the support they needed from the programs that the government put through. They intended them to, but they didn't get it. And so those small businesses need to be propped up, because people just can't lose that many jobs. It just can't. It can't work.
Yeah. All of these great financial crises essentially just bleed out small companies and laborers, and the big companies get stronger and buy up all the little stuff that's getting shed.
Well, I live in Florida, and it's really sad. It's, and that, I guess that's the thing that makes me the saddest, is because I see all these people who work really hard, and they survive only because we have tourists coming. Well, no one's going to come here anymore, because in the summers we used to get the British and the Germans. They're not coming. We can't go to the EU. The EU can't come here. People from the New England areas, they won't come here. So, and we don't have an income tax. All we've got is a sales tax. And so Florida, and we're doing as best we can, but you can't open up a state 50% and have it survive. 50% doesn't pay your bills long term. It doesn't pay your rent. It doesn't pay your mortgage. And it sure as heck won't send your kids to college. So we're going to have to look at how we compensate people, and how we retrain people, how we refocus societies and I know that this is just, to most Americans, horrible to say, but I think, Andrew, we need to learn to live with less. I think you and I probably realize this, but I really realize this. Americans buy a lot of crap, and they don't need it, and they hoard in their houses all their stuff, and it's nuts. And you go to France, and everybody's out walking around, and they're walking and walking, and it's a whole culture of walkers. Well, they live in small apartments, so they go out and enjoy the society.
Experience rather than stuff.
Exactly. And we'd be healthier and happier. We don't need all the stuff.
Yeah.
And I know that because I used to, before I was in finance, I used to be in advertising, and I know the racket, because it even works on me. So
let's just talk more about resilience and the spiritual life that's been missing, that is sort of being demanded right now that we get back into. How do we get into this this place that we've been avoiding that will actually pull us through this crisis?
Well, I think that we need to start with that we aren't lacking, you know, and that we do have all of our needs. And when people focus only on their lack and lose gratitude, you can't be resilient if you're resentful. If you feel like someone's done you wrong and you harbor that injury, you're not going to have resilience because you can't, because you're angry. You know? And you know, I can't remember what all the negative emotions are in Buddhism, but I know that hatred's one of them. And you just can't get there if you harbor resentment and anger. And that's what's so sad is we're and think of how exhausting that is, Andrew, to our whole country to have people staying angry so long. So that's how we get resilience, is love and forgiveness. But you know,
Think about how anger feels. It's like pressure, but it's inside of yourself. You're not actually exerting any energy or force anywhere else. It's just anger. It's like, "Arr!" And then you're just steam comes out of your ears, but not much actually happens.
no, and that spiritual resilience has to come from a sense of confidence and peace, and that comes from knowing that the things that you're doing are right for you, and not being in constant competition. You know, if you're in constant competition, you're always just looking. You're like on the little rodent on the wheel. So if you can't ever focus on being genuinely kind to others or doing something nice, um, you know, I know that all these people in this restaurants around here, because I live near the beach. I mean, I'm as close as you get. And and what's really sad is in the off season, which we are now, most of their business is senior citizens. Well, senior citizens aren't going out because they can't. So these people are all doing delivery and you know they do all kinds of things. And so you know I single-handedly try and keep a couple places afloat. You know, because I miss these people and I went and picked up lunch after physical therapy the other day, and I told the lady that brought it out to the truck. I said, "Would you tell everybody how?" She says, "Oh, I will." You know, and I said, you just make enough to stay afloat. Just keep the door open. And so that's, you know, that's the kind of resilience we need. Is just I'm going to do this to help my neighbor do what they can't do. Um, I have a nephew who lives in Harlem, and he volunteers to deliver food to shut-ins all the time. And he doesn't have a job because he lost his job. He's on unemployment, but he's delivering food 4 or 5 days a week. And I just think about, you know, what a blessing he is to those people. And that gives him resilience, and it gives them resilience to make it through. To, you know, it's like being in a we are in a risky situation. We're in a very dangerous place right now. And how do you get out of danger? You just take yourself out of danger and leave everybody else? No. You get the women and children in the lifeboat first. You make sure that they know you do things right. You wait till we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, that's what we're at. And that's where resilience comes from. Spiritual resilience is because if you believe that, and I do, that God is love and fills all time and space and not a judgmental old guy in the sky, then you know that changes your whole perspective of how you view everything. And so, you know, and I, you know, and I just think that the one thing we've got to do is be more generous to each other. And so I even have some friends that post all this crazy stuff on Facebook. I mean, just crazy stuff. And I don't unfriend them. I just don't follow them. I'll go back and check, but I just can't, because I don't want to think bad of them. And I think that they're afraid. And when people are afraid, that's a negative emotion too. And when you can't overcome that fear of this virus,
Right.
then that links to that anger.
And so arguing them or shaming them is
No,
the opposite
doesn't
thing you
work.
want to do. You
No.
want to reach out to them and love them, give them support.
And name calling them and proving they're wrong doesn't work. Prove what you have to do. But I've got to admit, there have been times living in Florida when I've been pretty angry, and I have to just kind of check myself and say, well, that's not going to help you, because it doesn't. It doesn't help. It doesn't
Well,
work.
Kathleen, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks. I enjoyed it. It's my first time on YouTube, and I didn't do my hair. Oh my!
Well, you were great.
I'll tell my cousin to tune in, and I know what she's going to say. You didn't do your hair.
Thank you so much.